He's trying to get up, and my first instinct was to hold him down because I thought he probably broke his back or his neck. So I'm holding him down, and he's a bigger guy than I am, and he's strong. And I'm like really wrestling with him, and I just looked at him, and he was looking at me like he's not gonna make it. And there was so much sorrow in his face. Like he could just see all of us loved him so much.
You mentioned your boys at the hospital. Like,
yeah.
That's just like tells me the kind of father you are. Just to be able to have kids that can be like that.
They were courageous. I worked so hard to just be worthy of his guidance. I just like rose to the occasion. And at the end of the movie, he's standing at the grave of the Tom Hanks character. And he just asked, like, did I deserve it? It's incumbent upon me. It's my responsibility to keep Jay alive.
We have an incredible episode for you today. I have Jon Loduca. I'm actually not, he's not in my studio. I'm actually in his office building today. And this is a man who has made me feel seen, who's made me feel important. And I was so curious about how somebody could just have that sense and that feeling. And we're going to get into a story today about the people that have inspired him to be like that. And also we're going to uncover a tragic moment that happened in his life. You won't want to miss it, how he's been able to be present through that and how he's been able to use that story to impact not only his family's life, but for the future generations of the world. So you won't want to miss this episode. Jon, it's good to see you, buddy. It's been a month and a half since we were hanging out at the Visionary Summit.
Except for the texting back and forth, yeah.
And I've always known who you were from being at some conferences, and I've been fascinated with this concept of the Playbook Builder and how you're using AI and process, and to be able to spend 3 days with you intentionally and get to really know you and your story. And you're so much more than just a guy that has a cool company.
Thanks.
And that's what we talk about here on the Big Fish Cares podcast. Not the company, but the man behind the company. And you have such a calming, but what I think is very powerful presence. And I'm so curious, like, where does that come from? That's the question, Jon.
It's a lot of yogurt. Actually, I eat a lot of yogurt.
All right, don't laugh it off, but like because I don't know, you're around other people, especially in this entrepreneurial world, and like you got to realize that you are really different than the way you show up, and the way your presence is very different than everyone else in the room most of the time. I will tell you all the time. I mean, I'm around thousands of entrepreneurs. I know one Jon Loduca, and I've never been around anybody like you before. I'm telling you right now, it's weird, it's unique, it's awesome, it's good, but I'm just trying to figure out what that mix of ingredients is, whether it's DNA. I know you grow up super Italian, right? And like I was listening to a podcast on my way here. It was with you and Deidre, the speaker. The speaker girl.
Deidre Van Ness.
Yeah, Deidre Van Ness.
Yeah, she's great.
Crazy Good Talks.
Yeah.
And I heard, like, in her intro, it said that you are a relative of Michelangelo's apprentice.
Yeah, apparently.
And that was cool.
That might be the reason why I don't know.
That was a cool little, like,
I'm an immigrant son. And I think there's something really in that I would characterize as being very strong, a part of who I am. I was actually born in Canada, so I guess I'm an immigrant.
An immigrant. So Italian, Canadian,
my
American.
dad came over on a boat from Italy, like the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And so that kind of hunger and drive, that kind of energy is exciting. I think that's got to be a part of his story is part of mine, I mean, he told me one time, we were having dinner in some bougie little Italian restaurant, and he came and lived through, war-torn Italy. Like just all the infrastructure ripped out of the place, just rubble everywhere, just devastation. He said, we're eating this like Italian bread, dipping it in olive oil. And he goes, this wasn't a delicacy. We used to eat it like this because it was too stale to chew. That's why you dip your bread in olive oil. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Like he lived through stuff that was appalling. I told you we went to Italy for a wedding. And it was neat. I was walking through Siena, and we'd stop, get a coffee. I bought a shirt. We're flirting with the girls at the shop, or gabbing with the old ladies at the deli, or whatever we were doing. We were just walking through Siena and talking. And I watched him pick up his Italian that he had mostly lost as we walked through this, the little labyrinth streets there.
How old was he when he moved over?
He's 13.
Okay.
So old enough that
so
it was
easier to lose it though. Cause I was going to say, can't imagine a 25-year-old Italian coming over and losing his accent.
No, but hard time, could barely read and write. He managed a pizza restaurant when he was 17.
It's very on brand.
I know, right? Right on it's a little too on the nose. But he owned it and 3 more when he was 21. And he got his contractor's license and graduated from the Detroit Institute of Music. So he was an opera singer.
Interesting.
And built homes.
Can we interview him?
He's, I'm afraid, passed on.
Passed away?
But,
how long ago did he pass away?
Oh, boy, I guess it's been about 5 years.
Oh,
He's
wow.
a really interesting cat.
Do you have videos of him? Did you ever create movies or content from him?
Yeah, and I will tell you, I had no idea about all of this stuff, but apparently he had a beautiful voice. He cut records at Mercury.
Wow.
He was a really beautiful tenor. And
Motown type stuff.
I tell you, my mom met him. He was singing in a nightclub, and she thought he was cute and took his photo off the wall, and he caught her. That's how they met. Yeah, he was a cool dude and driven like a son of a bitch, like just a driven guy and that kind of hunger. Yeah, so I knew this guy that was kind of an artist, and sit there and listen to Pavarotti and get all teary-eyed, and knew the libretto to whatever opera. And then he'd be on a job site ripping a guy's head off for leaving cigarette butts on somebody's front yard. He just was like this.
Tale of two lives.
Totally. And in a way, I think he kind of left his art to support a family, which as an older guy and a dad, I really respect that. I thought it was sort of tragic or something. I didn't understand. When I was a younger guy, I thought he, tore him up and stuff like that. But I really appreciate the sacrifice he made. Like he gave it all to us. He was all in all the time. Neat dude. But that kind of immigrant all in, not like he was super fun and warm and fuzzy. You know what I mean? He was like a truck.
Tell me about your mom.
She brought gentility.
Was she Italian?
No, French Canadian and Scotch Irish.
Was that weird for an Italian to marry a French Canadian?
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But she is more of the classic American culture kind of stuff. Taught me which fork to use at the table, and she brought a more gentility. Not that they were very fancy, but just a nice traditional family, and so they were definitely like Northern Italian meets Southern Italian. Or Southern Europe, Northern Europe. Yeah.
I know you were telling me a little bit before the show, you went to college.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm assuming that was probably a big deal for your dad.
Yeah. My sister went first. My sister went first and I went, yeah. And, he really wanted me to join his company. And I think he thought maybe that would be cool. But the older we both got, I think he realized he didn't want me to work with my hands. He's like, you want to get a job, work it. And he wasn't right about that. But I loved him for wanting me to have the American dream. And so, yeah.
You've had it.
Yeah, I have. And I took him up on it and worked really hard. And, I think he's proud of me. We didn't always have a great relationship like most sons and dads.
Why do you think that is?
Because I was an idiot. Because I was a young teenage knucklehead,
What are you doing differently now? Because I know you have 2 teenage boys.
Yeah.
So what now? The lessons that you've learned about your relationship, I'm sure
that's
that
a heck of a question. That's a good one.
Yeah. Wait, tell me, because I have a 10-year-old, so I want to learn from you.
Yeah, I tell you what. I started parenting them differently. When they're little and you're like, hey, get out of the road. You know what I mean? You're just not, it's not a negotiation. Then they're teenagers and now it's what do you think you should do? And so I'm starting to move into, I'm never going to be their buddy, but I'm no longer shut up, sit down, do that. But I absolutely am more well, you got a couple of options. Let's weigh them. Let me show you what's on the menu. And that kind of guide is a neat opportunity. I read a fantastic book right around that period I was telling you about earlier. It's called Fathered by God. And the same guy who wrote Wild at Heart. And so it's a book about being a man and it's being, fathered by God effectively. And they talk about chapters of manhood. And, you get the childhood and then you got teenage, young adulthood. But they inserted one into the category, and I was like, oh no, that's cool. It's called cowboy. And I don't know what you were like between 18 and 25, but you're a lot of trouble if you don't have purpose and guidance. And my dad came from a culture of like, well, done with college, God bless, good luck, go get a career, go do that forever. And that's really where I needed him. So my jam with my sons is, oh no, 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 that's where I double down. Because that's where it's like, should I marry her? I'm stuck doing something. Am I supposed to power through or cut bait? Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Those bigger decisions can be life-changing. And I really want to be there with them through that, as opposed to, well, I got to go, So a big purpose of my career was to figure out how to set myself up so I'd be available. Because I kind of got like brought in, parented, put into the system and told like, well, the system will take care of you. I don't believe in that anymore.
Where your dad was working all day.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
and they just sort of thought the institutions would set us up. Well, you go to college and then, you do the thing. And it was like, oh no.
That's how they sold it back in the day, huh?
That's exactly how they sold it.
They definitely they almost sell the exact opposite nowadays.
Yeah, no kidding.
I feel like, but they still want you to go to college and pay $100,000 a year to go. Literally you go to school, pay all this money, and you might get a job making $50,000 a year.
Yeah, I can't even. So that's exactly the point is parenting them at 10 and parenting them at 15 and parenting them at 20, I think it's going to be really different. And I'm already sliding into a mode of dad that my dad didn't.
Have you ever thought about, as ideas pop in your head, about things that you wish your dad would have been there for you between 18 and 25, of popping it into like a playbook builder? So then that way.
I did do this. It wasn't why we did Playbook Builder, but I was charged with sitting across the table from really successful entrepreneurs. And I didn't deserve that. I just got lucky and was there. And so that Jim Rohn quote about you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, Dan Sullivan sent clients to us and I got to work with like top 1% income earners, like really flipping successful people, 30-year veterans. And they were like, 10 years older than the two of us, maybe more, maybe 20 years. I was just like a knucklehead 35-year-old guy. And I didn't have to be the consultant because there was no chance. So it was cool. Nobody expected me to teach. I was just there to learn. But their problem was they had to get it out of here into another format, right? So I could ask them whatever I wanted and just be the knucklehead 35-year-old and be like, why do you do that? Well, have you, and just get them to share and teach and mentor me because we were filming it and it became an asset to them. And it got started because my wife's mother was in her 90s. I loved her. And we knew she was probably going to be going in the next few years. So every time she got started on a story, one of us would slide the phone over and make sure we caught it. Because what a beautiful thing. There's a bunch of things that happened in my life that kind of set me up to do Playbook Builder. I'm the beneficiary of a whole lot of lucky stuff that happened from a lot of good men and women. I just have to pay it back. It was pretty neat. Yeah. Sullivan gave me this opportunity and there are a number of entrepreneurs that crossed paths with me that just took me under their wing. I had a mentor. I was just blessed.
Why do you think you've been so blessed?
I prayed one night, really, really lost on my knees. Like,
How old were you?
26, 27, begging God for wisdom. I didn't want to be rich. I figured it was like, when the genie comes, you rub the lamp and you're like, I'm going to wish for 25 wishes, right? Like that's the play. So I figured I just begged for wisdom and he served it up. And he came through all these people, all these amazing men and women and really smart, lovely people. You're a good example. You're the kind of person I've just been blessed to like encounter. And I'm just seeking it humbly, and always open to that. Your first question, I don't know. I think I'm just humble. I think that's maybe what you see in me. I had a high school teacher said, don't take yourself very seriously. Take what you do seriously.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine like your Italian father, and I'm sure he was probably pretty humble.
No? He had a whole lot of buried, ugly, hard feelings.
Oh, really? Interesting. So maybe that's why you were the opposite of that.
I think I did. Side. I think I compensated. He had an awful childhood. I can't blame him for growing up like he did. I mean, it's kind of like the baton pass,
Interesting.
in track and field. Like he did his job. He brought the baton pretty far, but he also started back in Ohio. I give the guy a break. Like he ran really far. It was a few time zones away. He came from being beaten by his dad and stuff. My mom told me a story. She was trying to get me to understand him. She's like, you have to understand your dad. Like he was 9 years old. He had his first job, and it wasn't like, go make yourself some money for candy. It was like, you have to support your family. You're 9 years old. So he has a job, and his grandpa said, when the porch light comes on, you need to run down here. And along the way, while he's making money, they let him keep some pennies, and he bought himself a bicycle. And one time he was out playing, and little Anthony didn't come when he was called. And so Grandpa took a sledgehammer and dismantled his bike. And you couldn't even recognize it as a bike anymore. That's how they did it.
That's trauma.
It was stuff like that.
That's trauma.
So
that's stuff we would talk about in therapy today.
Totally, dude. And if I blame him for what he did, I would be a jerk because he brought the baton so far.
Yeah.
He never did stuff like that.
And then he taught you obviously to not throw your kid's bike up against the freaking wall, right?
Like he didn't repeat it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
You when I was at the Visionary Summit, we went outside, we had this share circle, and we were talking about legacy. And you were sharing the story about your father-in-law's legacy and about how he would go into the bank and like just be super nice to people. And at his funeral, there was a line wrapped around the building, and I got chills now thinking about that. Like just like the people that are in life that are just out there, just not loud, not bragging, not doing whatever, just being super humble, just day in and day out. And like
there's a story from his funeral where I think my sister-in-law and brother-in-law were at a cafe, and it was like the day after the funeral, and a gal waiting tables was like, I knew your dad. Like this guy didn't have his name on a building or do anything, but Jay Fink was his name. And Jay Fink is the kind of guy that would go down to Lowe's because he was bored. He'd see like a coupon in the circular, and he'd go down there and negotiate and haggle with the sales guys. They all knew him. They loved him. They thought he was fun and kind, and he remembered stories, and he invested in relationships with the ladies at the bank, and people just felt seen by him. And he found an access point, whatever it was. He was like a kind of a Midwest guy. So he could talk to you about Spartans this year. We're going to put it together this year. But he could also go deep. His girls loved him. He had 3 daughters, 3 beautiful girls, and they adored him. And it was a blessing for me to be married into that family because my dad was bluster and, yelling and pounding on tables and the whole cliche. And then Jay was like, a totally different vibe and a really dear second dad for me. And he left a real crater. Like people really showed up. Like, the ladies at the bank, they brought a bouquet of flowers like as long as my leg. Like there was a line out and this isn't a famous guy.
Yeah.
Kids from high school, kids that went to high school with my wife showed up for his funeral because they remembered how he talked to them as young men. That's the kind of guy he was.
Wow.
He was a really cool dude.
What are some of the keys? So you have these incredible men in your life. You got your dad, you got your wife's dad. Tell me about like some of the differences. Because it sounds like they obviously are completely different types of humans, but they also had such an amazing impact on your life.
Yeah. And I would be remiss not to mention Dan Taylor, who was probably the reason I'm an entrepreneur. Like Dan Taylor knew what I was before I knew what I was. And so I'd be remiss.
Who's that?
So he was a coach at Strategic Coach.
Okay.
And a really cool dude. Like, I still want to be like Dan when I grow up. Yeah, I'll tell you about Dan.
I can't wait to meet Dan one day.
Dan died of an aneurysm.
Oh, shit.
He got brain cancer.
All these amazing men in your life, and I can't meet any of them right now.
know,
I'm 0 for 3 right now.
I know. But I feel like Obi-Wan and Yoda are standing behind me, you know what I mean?
Well, eventually
like
Elon will be able to bring him back.
Yeah.
Elon will have like a virtual, we'll be able to like AI talk to them.
Taylor was a piece of work, man. He was a wild animal. He would have loved you. Yeah. He was an absolute, strictly speaking, full-on visionary, probably minted the word. He had 5 or 6 companies running. Let me give you some examples. He was a coach, a strategic coach. He was a lawyer. He built, he was a financial advisor, and he built a business teaching financial advisors how to talk to their aging parents or their clients, how to talk to their aging parents about money. He wrote a book. He was getting MasterCard to make a special credit card for it. He built the American Pet Cross and sued the IRS and beat them because they wanted to shut him down. He owned Derbyshire, which is a real estate property, and he was developing all this stuff in North Carolina. Let me be super clear. At the same time, he did all this at the same time. And when he met me, he was like, read this book and then read this book. And I kept back to him like a puppy. I was like, okay. And he was a coach. And so he introduced me to his clients. And that's how I broke in. But he knew what I was even when I didn't. He had more faith in me than I had in me.
What does that feel like when someone like what's that feeling like? Because there's a lot of men out there, a lot of, I would say 75% of my audience is probably driven men that have never had that happen.
Well, I'll be perfectly frank with anybody listening. It's not like I felt like I deserved it. The only reason that I felt so grateful and a tremendous responsibility to take him up on it and not disappoint him. So my dad was hard to read and I didn't have a strong relationship with him. 40 years later, I got good optics on it. But at the time, he and I were not close. I hadn't even really spent time developing a relationship with Jay yet. Jay Fink, my father-in-law. I was just the knucklehead who married his daughter. I hadn't, turned into anybody very useful yet. He was good to me, but I'm sure he must have been like, God,
And you didn't even know what you had in him because you probably didn't like.
I couldn't access it yet. Yeah. He just put up with my shit, but he's a good dude, and I think he was happy because his daughter was happy, and I was loyal and hardworking. But they were worried. Taylor knew what I was, and I got a phone call on Thanksgiving 4 years later, and he said, "Okay, so here's the deal. I have stage 4 glioblastoma. If I leave it in, I'll be dead by Valentine's Day, but I'm going to try for the surgery. I got a 50-50 chance coming out of that. Now here's what we're going to do next." And this is what he wanted to do. He comes to my office. He looks awful. He looks like Darth Vader when I took the mask off. The prednisone, stuff they're giving him, he just looked awful. And he wasn't a prideful guy, but it was a sad thing to see him look so disfigured by the bloating and the swelling. What he built with me was a unique process to help people in a life or death situation, a situation like his, to calmly and rationally think through their options. That was his legacy. That's what he wanted to do. That's how he spent the last 8 weeks working with me. We filmed him and we captured his wisdom so he could leave it as a playbook to teach other people who find themselves in a life and death situation. He had to navigate with all the emotion of this stuff, how to think through, like, what are my options? How do I want to do this? What are the things I need? That's what he wanted to leave, a thinking tool. Can you imagine the kind of guy like that? He's not going to his bucket list. He's transforming that extraordinarily terrifying experience into intellectual property, into something he can hand off so that in his absence on the planet, I love that guy. He was I called him one night. I'm like, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm lying in bed. I'm watching a movie with the word fist in the title." Like he was just always watching like the most total guy movies. "And I'm reading the Quran." Like, what are you doing? He was like a genius, right? So he's just always up to this weird crap. And gosh, he taught me how he would run projects. He's like, "I need a lawyer, I need a project person, I need a PR guy or something like that, a marketing person. And then I come in and I spin them and then I'm off to the next one." He was a force of nature, restless, big vision, an amazing guy. And he really set me up, and I owe him my career, not only because he was helpful in a practical sense, like showing me things, but actually just recognized me. And I didn't deserve it. I mean, I was just a lump of clay, but I wanted so badly to like earn his trust. I worked so hard to just be worthy of his guidance. I just like rose to the occasion. I knew it was like a shot.
It's like the call to adventure.
Totally, dude. Full on hero's
I
journey.
can hear it when you say it. It
Yeah.
sounds like the hero's journey. It sounds like
is.
as soon as he like speaks, boom, like you're like on
100%
fire.
the call to adventure.
Because he also knew exactly how to ignite you and also give you tools and activities that he knew that was going to excite you.
100%.
And so almost every time he was like just hitting home runs. Is that how Playbook Builder was born? Like, what did you do Playbook Builder before he was? Were you starting to develop that before he was?
No, but he's the guy that said videos online is going to be big.
That's what I'm saying. So
this
that was
is,
like the first time that you did like took somebody's wisdom, videotaped it, and like.
No, it wasn't. But Dan was the one that got me going on video.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, this is like 05, 06? You know,
before YouTube.
Just and he knew it was coming, and I can't remember the platforms, but he was like, "This is going to be big, and you should be investing in this." And so I got a camera. I got one of those flip cameras.
You mean nothing like we got today?
Yeah, exactly like this.
Dennis. Like Dennis brought the heat.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're ever going to be like in Southwest Michigan, man, get hold of Dennis. But anyway, that's incredible, man. That you've had amazing.
Yeah, but I didn't deserve them. I just
but
was
you do
smart enough
but you do deserve,
to know
everyone deserves it, I believe.
Okay. So what I mean is I didn't earn them, but I stepped up to meet them. Like I knew a good thing when I
didn't squander them, that's for sure.
Didn't squander them. I was humble about knowing this would make a difference in my life. And I took advantage of their generosity and Dan did that. And then Jay later on, like as I became a grown man, had a wife and a family, he was a really good friend. You know,
give me an example of that, like an aha moment when you realized the type of relationship that you had with your father-in-law, and like when you're like, oh my gosh, I have another like wisdom person here.
Yeah.
Like,
so I built this business up, the professional services company in Chicago, and I just got tired of it, and it was sort of broken. It was just like not working. I was charging an arm and a leg, but we were just the consulting cliff. You know what I mean? There's no recurring revenue. It wasn't really scalable. And I was working my tail off, kind of getting exhausted. I mean, it was like charging an arm and a leg, like 20 grand for a day of strategy. Like I didn't have any place else to go. I just hit the ceiling of fees, but I still was like chief cook and bottle washer, running around. I'd hire people who work out. I was like, I was pre-EOS. I was pre-operating system. I just was sort of stuck, and I decided to bag it. And I remember being like rattled by the decision. I just let everybody go, wound up the office, and I brought everything home and kind of did a regroup. And the only person that actually understood was the same person that said, well done. And that was him. He's the only one that was like, I know exactly what you did, and that takes a lot of balls. And I couldn't believe it because he's the only one that had a dog in the fight. Everybody else was an observer. His daughter is married to me. His grandchildren live in my home, and he thought it was cool. That's a great example. I was like, what an unusual guy. He had so much faith in me. It was like the biggest compliment. And it was such a neat experience to just, I'm going to have that situation at some point. Someone's going to marry my daughter, you know, Evelyn Grace.
Yeah, Evelyn Grace. You know, isn't that crazy, by the way? We found that out. We were at the Visionary Summit. So you guys know I have a 2-year, she's 2 years old, Evelyn Grace. And he's like, I have an Evelyn Grace. I'm just like,
yep, she's 10.
That's not a coincidence.
That's the craziest
There are no
thing.
coincidences.
And it is such a beautiful name. It's just the most beautiful name. When I heard you say it, my heart just filled up. I was like, oh, it's such a great name. And it's at my daughter's name too. Well, somebody's going to marry that girl, and I'm going to want to throttle his ass, I'm sure, on a regular basis. And Jay never did. He was patient, kept his mouth shut. He watched me bang into walls left and right. And he was always on my team. It was a pretty neat thing. So it's a pretty good example, you know?
Yeah, that's... So
I don't know how to account for all of this. I keep bumping into these words, but
blessed.
I just was blessed.
You're blessed.
And I knew it. I think that's the most important thing, is like to literally count your blessings, to write them down, to count them, to account for them. And I just didn't take them for granted. And I was feeding them too. You know, I wasn't just saying, oh yeah, I deserve that, so of course Dan Taylor's on my team. No. I was like, holy crap, you know. And how do I nurture this? And how do I say thank you in a really meaningful way? And how do I show him that I really hurt him? How do I demonstrate that? So I just killed myself to be worthy of these great guys. And in doing so, it made me a better entrepreneur.
Well, and you had to feel, I know we were talking before the show a little bit about like, obviously you're looking at all your peers and all your friends and all your buddies through college, and you're probably looking at them and you're like, my life's a little different, right? Like your life's a little bit different than some of the, like the struggles that maybe your friends have went through in life or some of the people that you've met. And it seemed to me that like that bothered you a little bit, that like you hadn't had any like traumatic, like real struggle in your life. Because like you'd hear these stories of these other kids.
But I got it early in not like trauma, like somebody.
Not trauma with a capital T.
No.
Little T.
But I was just lost. I didn't know what I was and didn't know how to fit in. I wasn't a kid that could figure out the system really naturally. I wasn't a very good student until Kathy Colby, and I got my I wept when I got my Colby.
What are you?
Village idiot, Colby. That's what they call it. There's names.
Stop it. What?
3296.
3296. I am a 6292.
Yeah, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I remember when I got mine, and I felt so known. And she just really like, they get the little audio.
Oh, yeah.
And it changed my life. I mean, I really was like, okay, so I belong. There's a place in the world. We gave the Colby gift to my sons.
You kept getting doses of confidence throughout your whole life. It feels like it's like you were getting constant doses of confidence from all these men, and then Kathy Colby.
Kathy Colby.
And then
and I did marry a great woman. I really nailed it.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. I'm like you. I mean, you can see it when you two are together, and it is a blessing. And I love, and I actually savor that for you. I know you know what it means.
Yeah.
And obviously a whole bunch of us would kick your ass if you didn't. But you're well married, and I am too. I married a really beautiful human being inside and out, and a lovely mom, and a smart, cool. You'd love her. She fit right into our conversations.
Does she work here?
She does.
I heard that somewhere. I think on another podcast I was listening to. You work with your wife.
Yeah, I get to work with her, and it's like the coolest because.
Was she working from home today or what?
Yeah, she always does. She's momming.
That's probably how she gets shit done. You're around.
Totally. She's momming, so she's, it Zooms in the car and stuff like that. But everybody, you got your wife doing the books or something like that. She's a badass.
She's actually like making things happen.
She's an incredible gal. Yeah. And can't fully utilize her in the business because her number one is parenting, and that's how we both look at it. So she's not feeling oppressed or anything. It's just we both agreed that's her number one. That's what she wants to be doing.
That's like more than a full-time job. Like I actually would rather go to work.
Yeah, well,
like when I'm watching Brittany, I'm like, I think I think what I do is actually pretty easy. Like, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, little kids, especially, and they're just youngins in diapers and stuff. If you told somebody like, what do you do all day long? I take care of 3 Alzheimer's patients. They're wandering around. They're touching crap they shouldn't. They're pooping in their pants. You'd be like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. It's so hard. How do you do that? Well, it's also the same thing if you have 3 little kids. It's almost exactly the same thing. And yet there's not as much support for that socially. Moms take on all of that. It's so hard. And as the kids have gotten older, a little more autonomous. I told you today, my oldest boy finally got his driver's license. We were pretty celebratory. Like, go, man, go. A, for his confidence, because it just means so much, manhood and all that. But also.
Did he want a Tesla? Does he want? Do they want Teslas nowadays?
They totally don't.
My 10-year-old was like, Dad, I'm going to get a Tesla. I want a Tesla. So I'm like, I'm trying to prepare myself to like, what's it like to buy a kid a car nowadays? Like I got a $3,000 beater.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes, as you should. Yes.
Yeah. Do they even have $3,000 beaters anymore?
I think they're more like $10,000
$10,000 beaters now.
Yeah,
okay.
We're buying him a $10,000 truck.
Okay.
And it's a beater, but it's the point, But yeah, man, I see his confidence like that. You can't put a price tag on that. Because he didn't know he could, and that was pretty neat for him.
Do you think you think your kids get the benefit of all of these men and women that we've been talking about that kind of like just sprinkled salt and pepper of confidence into you?
You're a dick. You're trying to make me cry. Yeah, I do. I feel a huge burden and responsibility.
But you just pepper them now with confidence.
That's my soul. I live for that now. That's my purpose of my life. I live for other people now. I had my time. I get to be I'm 53. The rest of my life is for others, and I don't even mind. I don't feel like I'm missing out or anything. I feel like what a huge gift And thank you to Jay and my dad and Dan and Taylor and everybody else. Dan Sullivan, unbelievable. Dan doesn't really even know he was my mentor. And Joseph Campbell, like I just kind of grabbed him. But I owe him. And the way I owe him is,
Well, you make people feel completely seen and like just like loved, like instantly. Like that's what I'm saying. Like I think we started the podcast. Like I'm like, why are you so different? Like this is the secret sauce. This is like the world is lucky that you've got to live that life.
Thanks.
And the way that you get to pass.
I think I'm lucky too. So I think that's part of it is the duty aspect.
Oh, well, now you get the next 50 years of your life to.
Do you remember?
You get to be that guy. Like I'm going to interview someone 20 years from now, and they're going to be like, and they're going to talk about Jon Loduca that way.
I would love that.
That's like your legacy.
That would be my greatest thrill. Do you remember Saving Private Ryan?
Kinda. It was long.
So there's this
a long movie.
So there's this really, really beautiful moment when the Matt Damon character who gets rescued from France, all these guys die, trying to get him out of Europe, out of the European theater. And at the end of the movie, he's standing at the grave of the senior guy, the Tom Hanks character. And he just asked, like, did I deserve it? That's a beautiful moment. That's the real deal. Like, you got to step right into that stuff. If you've been given those gifts, if somebody's sacrificed for you, like, pay it forward, As a dad, it's a great privilege, but I get to do it through business and stuff.
We get a lot of practice through business, hanging out with all these entrepreneurs.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just like us, you know what I mean? They've been banged up and had crappy dads or had a challenging upbringing or whatever their story. And then you see them out in the world, like making shit happen and creating careers for other people. And some kid is going to go to college because their dad got to work for this entrepreneur. Like that is the coolest. So yeah, they get all I've got. Cause I just think, whew, somebody I'll never meet is impacted because I helped their dad with this business. That's just the coolest, Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you got me. You're a jerk. You got me. That was that moment in Saving Private Ryan. Like I feel a little bit like that sometimes. Like, man, I can't believe I went my good fortune.
What other movies have done that to you where like you can get that emotional about a moment? We're not even watching the movie. We're just thinking about the movie. That's incredible.
Yeah. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. There's probably a ton of them, but I just can't think of any off the top of my head.
That's what's fun about movies, right? You can like, especially if you can be present enough to immerse yourself as the person in the movie and feel like what they're feeling, right? Yeah. And then like it's an incredible experience to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Art is incredible that way.
I don't know if that's just a thing that us visionaries can do or just driven or like anybody can do that. But like,
yeah,
I noticed that like when I talk to other driven visionaries that like we have that ability to be able to like immerse ourselves and be like almost hyper present into like a scene of something like that. Cause we're like, I think that's where like our ADHD like gets like zones in so hard.
Yeah.
And like we're like in it. And then the guy who made the movie is also like us because like that's how they are. They're driven, they're creative,
we're
right?
Talking about
and
this.
And it's like we're in this I don't know what it's called. But
that always trips me out though, and it's a little spooky and maybe weird for your podcast listeners, but
that's right.
Like when you're laughing at a poem that's 400 years old, or you're looking at a painting of a real just guy in his kitchen from the 1600s, like the idea that we're bridging those gaps through art is pretty powerful. But I remember one time we were talking about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and I was saying how, isn't it weird, like you're watching Tom Cruise and he's like in some action movie getting the absolute crap beat out of him. And he's all the way down in the belly of the whale, right? He's in the worst part of the hero's journey. He's in the trials, right? And it's just brutal. But you sitting in the dark eating your popcorn, you don't really lose sight of the fact that he's the hero. And that's part of the process. You're not like, I think he's going to die. We're all going to have to go home. Like, of course not.
No, it's a 2-hour movie.
It's a 2-hour movie. We're only a little bit into it. But we so lose sight of that with our own lives.
Yeah. And
like you go, oh, this is super bad. It's going to destroy me. It's like, bro, you're the you're the hero. Mm-hmm. It's act one. Like it's going to look really bad and it's going to seem really awful. And all of that's going to be why you're the freaking hero. So just be okay with that. It's part of the process. Do you see how we lose that when it's us and we don't lose it when it's Tom Cruise? Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just had a moment like that a year ago. Did you feel that then?
No.
You weren't aware?
I absolutely didn't see it as heroic at all.
Not heroic.
Transformational.
Not heroic.
100%.
Not heroic. I wouldn't call it heroic, but like when you were in a low moment, right? Like in a valley, right? Of like, oh my gosh, what are your like can you be aware that you're in a moment like that, but also at the same time know that there'll be a time. No. So that's what I mean. Like you can't. It's hard to watch your own movie.
Yeah, you're right on. That's a valid point. I think the trauma aspect of that particular incident was such that I don't think I really processed for a couple, 2-3 months. Yeah. It was that kind of thing. So I don't want to disrespect anybody's circumstances and say, yeah, pull yourself out of it. You're in the moment. You know, that was it. It feels to me like that's not like, oh, we're having a bad quarter with sales. That's, you know, holding a guy in your arms that you adore and watching him basically leave the planet. Like that was pretty much the hardest thing.
Take us back to that moment. I mean, I think it's the way that you tell the story is very, I think for people listening, it's very movie-like. Obviously, hopefully nobody ever has to go through that, right? But the way that you were able to share that, I found it. That's when I first connected with you, when you shared that story about your father-in-law, Jay.
Yeah.
And the best part about the story, well, not the best part, that's a weird way to say it. The part about the story that I like just still remember is how he treated the people at the bank, not about the tragedy.
Oh man.
Like, and like, that's what's incredible. Like, that's all I heard was like, oh, I want to be like the guy that just goes to the bank and like makes the girl smile.
100%.
What was it like that day at your house? Because you had people over at your house, right? Everyone was at your house.
Yeah. So I married into a not a huge family, but a really healthy, positive vibe kind of family. Like family's super important, and they all want to get together all the time. So 3 girls, all married, 3 kids, and then grandparents. You know what I mean? And the whole 9 yards. Once in a while, there's a boyfriend thrown in there as the cousins are getting older and stuff like that. The little kids are getting to be teenagers and such. But yeah, we have like a house full in the summer, and because we live in Holland and it's pretty out here by the beach and stuff. And then at Christmas time, because we can kind of manage all these little kids. It looks like a Dr. Seuss episode. Like you open a drawer and there's a toddler in there, you know. It's just like there's people sleeping on couches and, you know, but we can accommodate all these people, 17 people or something like that. And I always loved that my father-in-law was part of the mix because, you know, we talk shop a little bit. He's a salesman many, many years ago. And so, you know, we catch up about football and he'd ask what's going on with the kids and stuff like that. But when everybody kind of settled down, you know, I'd grab a glass of scotch and chat with him about like, let me tell you what's going on. And he always gave me good advice. We'd always talk about it. And I always wanted to engage him. So I'd tell him stuff that I thought he could kind of share some insight about, and flat out brought him problems just to ask him for his insights. And he was a practical guy. I mean, he always had been that guy in our lives. Like he showed me when we first got married, his ledger. This is the kind of guy he was. Like, you're going to need to buy tires, you know, about every 5 years. So I put away $9.87 every month. Like
really?
What? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's a smart dude, but in a subtle way, like on an old school, like 1975 kind of ledger.
Writing in cursive?
Totally, dude. He just was that kind of guy, but we'd sit and we'd BS and catch up and stuff like that. And at the time I was catching up with my brother-in-law, Joe. Joe and I were shooting the bull, and Jay was sitting over there, and the girls were in the kitchen, and kids were running around. And Jay got up, and he was gone. Well, we got some property, and I'm a terrible property manager, you know, and I've got some trees out there with some dead branches, and hadn't hired the tree company. But Jay lives on a farm too, and he bought like a great big pole saw with a chainsaw on the end of it, you know, those kind of things.
Yeah.
He was going to help me out. Well, I sitting there talking to Joe, and all of a sudden I hear screaming, and my wife running across the front yard, down kind of to the pasture there, kind of down the driveway. And I could feel that it was a sound, like I can still hear her voice in my mind. So I run to the front door, and there's Jay under a branch of a tree. I have no idea why, he's a smart guy, killed himself with a branch. He wasn't quite out when I got to him. He was struggling on the ground. And, it's about as awful as you can imagine. Like he's underneath this great big branch. He's covered in blood. One of his eyes is facing the wrong direction, like the kind of thing you'd see in a movie. And it's just too gory to even fathom. But there he was, and he's my father-in-law. He's trying to get up, and my first instinct was to hold him down because I thought he probably broke his back or his neck. So I'm holding him down, and he's a bigger guy than I am, and he's strong. And I'm like really wrestling with him. And this is like the last, few moments I have with him. And everything else just starts to get like you're underwater, like just like in the movies. It's just like in the movies. Everything's in slow-mo. I have these like snapshot of a face, snapshot of a face. Did they finally get the paramedics here? My wife, who's like the most beautiful person I've ever met, she knows that he wasn't really an active Christian. So she baptizes him on the spot with her tears. She basically saves his soul. Yeah. I mean, incredible. But like in these weird, less like a movie, like these crazy, like snapshot. And I told you earlier, and it really upsets me even in memory, but there was this fireman, big guy, looked just like a stock photo of like a fireman, like this great big dude. He's probably a veteran, and he's in his 50s or whatever, and he's kneeling down opposite of me, and they're putting a neck brace on and getting him into the thing. They're going to life flight him to the hospital, even though, well, this is the point. He looks at me, and without saying a word, it was like my mind looked at him, and there was so much power in his eyes, like so much force in there. I stopped whatever I was thinking or doing, and I just looked at him, and he was looking at me like he's not going to make it. And there was so much sorrow in his face. Like he could just see all of us loved him so much. It was the hardest thing that moment. It was just ridiculously challenging just to know like, oh God, this is really real. And I for some strange reason didn't completely fall apart, collected all the sisters and my mother-in-law, packed quick bags and stuff like that, and like stupid stuff like I got your glasses, and gathered everybody up. We had all these little kids running around, so my brother-in-law stayed with the little ones, and we rushed to the hospital, and he passed away a couple of days afterwards. And you hear this stuff as such a cliche, but like, you don't want to find out what a good guy you were when at your funeral, and I'm sure Jay had some sense of it, but we're talking about a small town guy, no real, I say no name on a building or anything. He didn't run for office. He's just a guy. There was a line. They'd never had this many people at a funeral in their town. And I was telling you, like, guys from high school that like, were friends with my wife and came around the house after football games, showed up at Jay's funeral. Like he was that guy. The ladies from the bank had a flower bouquet that must have cost them $500. People came from all over the country, and a waitress mentioned him to my brother and sister-in-law like 4 or 5 days later, because somehow through this small community knew him and knew his name. And yeah, we lost a good one. We lost a really good guy. And the only benefit of it is, I really loved him. So I push it forward, I carry that along. That's the best I can do. He didn't write a book or anything. So I'm trying to,
You're not writing a book, you're writing a story though.
Yeah. That's how I do it.
This is kind of part of it, actually.
Well, yeah.
It's
I'm parenting like you would parent. I think about him often. Yeah.
How's your wife doing?
Oh, very hard. I mean, we spent a pretty much like good 6 months in some crazy fog There's like so every anniversary, we write each other a letter, kind of tell the story of the year back and forth and crack each other up.
That's cute.
Read them at dinner. It is cute.
Wow.
And like you forget shit because you're running a million miles an hour. It's like, oh my God, that's right. We did do that. So we do this. And this was the weirdest one because there's just this sort of like, I don't really know what happened between July and February. Like it's just a blank spot. Yeah. Yeah.
What advice do you have for people that go through something like tragic like that? That's like, it's very traumatic, right? It just happens out of nowhere.
Oh man, I got so much good advice. Amy Holtz, who's an EOS implementer, hardest size of a Buick. She gave me fabulous advice. And a lot of people fail, they ask you how you're doing and you don't want to lie. And then you find yourself crying to some stranger. It's the worst thing ever. So you kind of just need to like deal with it. We don't do this crap very well in the West. Like we're not a society that knows how to do this. Like a complete fool. I'm like back at work in like 3 weeks. Had no idea how banged up I was. So I'm just like the walking wounded. I'm like on the phone with people. And then by 3 o'clock, I want to murder everyone. I'm like yelling at people at stop signs. I'm out of control. Like I was dealing with a lot. And she said something that was cool. She said, be really patient. She said, there's like a stone in the river now, a great big boulder, but the water will still go around it. It'll not fade, but it'll move through you and it'll move around and you'll find that you can accommodate this in your life. And that was neat and beautiful, kind of a poetic way of describing it. I like that. But moreover, I just learned like, this has got its own time frame. You're waiting for a baby. That baby comes when that baby's ready and it's not up to you. I guess you can do a scheduled C, but like if you just let the baby come when it wants to, it'll come whenever the hell it wants to. I think mourning is like, I was like, okay. And it was like, I wasn't done. And I didn't know how to do that because we don't really talk about it a lot. So I didn't have a lot of examples, but so many great people came to me. And the gift, another example was, my gosh, do I ever know how to support somebody now? I would have just been like, dude, really sorry about that. I wouldn't have known. I mean, I've had people pass away, but they were 98 years old. And it was like, I bet she's glad to be done, eating through a tube or whatever. But this was like, he wasn't done yet. He was 72. It was like getting hit by a truck. And now I know the person in that situation can't form words, don't remember anything. You just come in and do nice things for them. You buy groceries and you show up and you drop them off and you don't expect a thank you. And you don't tell them nice things like it'll be better and shit like that. You just come in and you create a little womb around them, a little space for them, and you get the hell out of there. And I wouldn't have known that. My administrative assistant knew that. And showed up, and I can see her face walking in my kitchen with $300 worth of groceries because she knew I still had 24 people in my house. Not 24, but I had about 12 people in my house, little kids running around. And we had to feed them, which seems like the most idiotic thing. And that is a neat way to love somebody. Not, what do you need, Benny? But I'm going to know what you need. That was super cool. And she just showed up with food, which seems pretty silly and low level when food, big deal. Honest to God, cold cuts and chips, and we fed kids, and that was so helpful. No one had to ask. People just sent me stuff.
You guys were able to mourn together as a family because of that.
People created that space, and that was pretty powerful. But we were, I would say, if someone's listening and you get something like this or it just happened to you, everything sounds like a cliche. And if I say anything, it just makes me feel self-conscious, but patience is the best advice. I wasn't, and I had this overdeveloped sense of duty to others in my family. So I was pushing myself. It didn't work. It blew up on me. I ended up getting diagnosed with PTSD and had to like back the hell off because I was just having a hard time. Of course,
What's that like?
Affirming. I was like, oh yeah, that's why I almost killed somebody at a stop sign 6 months later. Yeah. Like I was just like, I am just wound out.
Have you ever been like that before?
Not like that. Not like that.
Like someone
inexplicably just depressed and down. And I was like, it can't be that. And it totally was that. And I got a very dear friend who's like, let me explain something to you. And I was like, oh God, yeah, of course that makes sense. I was first on the scene, holding him down while he struggled. It couldn't have been more grisly and terrifying. And I just went to, now I got to take care of my kids, and my daughter's freaked out, and I got to make sure my sons get a chance to see him. And oh my God, my poor wife. Like I'm not trying to be a sexist. It's just, I'm the man of the house. It's just duty. Like I just went into duty, and duty allowed me to hide out a little bit. So probably I kind of chickened out from dealing with some of this stuff, but it sure as shit caught up with me, you know?
You mentioned your boys at the hospital.
Ooh.
I thought that's powerful. Like,
Yeah.
That's just like tells me the kind of father you are. Just to be able to have kids that can be like that. What were they like during that situation?
They were courageous. And I don't know if I could have done it. So they're playing, they're goofing around with their cousins and running around the backyard, and all this stuff happens. And my, I think it was my brother-in-law, Joe. I think it was him, but somebody was smart and got him inside and kept him from seeing Papa in that state, But it was traumatic. I mean, flipping life flight off to the hospital, and everyone's flipping out, and the whole thing's just so horrific, and we don't know what's going to happen. And then we do know what's going to happen. They're going to take him off of support, and he's going to pass away. And I had to sit down with my sons and explain that to them and ask them if they'd like to go to the hospital and say goodbye to him, which is terrifying when you're 14 and you go to the hospital and, there's just stuff in other rooms and noises and sounds. And then to see your,
like weird,
and then to see your papa lying in bed and you're going to say goodbye to him and he's not going to be there anymore. And I sat in a chair and wept watching, them tell him what a good job he did and how much they loved him and the things they enjoyed about him. And they were sad they weren't going to get to do, but they would help take care of grandma. Like, yeah, you're a dick, man. Make me.
I'm not. Like it's beautiful. It's so beautiful, and I will say that for whatever reason, I'm trying to figure out like why God's allowed you to be able to have that moment, process through that moment, be able to talk about that moment, because like you said earlier, like so many of us like stuff everything down, and we stuff it down and we cover it up, and then we go work and we try to be busy.
Absolutely.
And like you've been through so much in just a short period of time. And I've had an incredible life. All of this stuff is just happening all at the same time, and it's just like a lot of emotion, right? A lot of feeling, and I can't help think about the impact that not only all of those stories of all of those people that instill confidence in you, and then at the same time when something tragic happens, you are then able to help instill a little confidence in them, and then you're watching the reflections of like your two boys that you've like, you're wondering if, I'm sure you wonder just like every other dad, am I doing a good enough job? Am I not doing a good enough job? Well, once you see that, it's like, check. And I know you still have work to do because we talked about the 18 to 25 gap.
We did.
And that's
it was
okay.
affirming.
But like, hey, but
it was
like,
affirming.
at least you don't have to, that's,
So I had to pay it forward, and an outlet for that is clients and, my family. And I got to see that those boys, had honor and respect and courage when they needed it, and gratitude, nice qualities for young men. And mostly it was the courage. Like, I mean, I can't imagine them doing that now, even now. It was a year ago, but they did it with so much integrity and kindness and real bravery. Yeah. I was so super proud of them. And, it's the whole thing. It's like the guy deserved it. He was that kind of a man. Like, you'd step up for him because he was that good a guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a flattering thing to my sons, and I don't mind having it portrayed that they're good young men and I'm proud of them. But gosh, Jay deserved that.
You almost couldn't help it. You almost have to be a psychopath not to do it, right?
He was that kind of a guy.
Yeah, that's incredible. How do we live a life like Jay?
Bingo.
That's a book.
That's a book.
That's a book.
It is. Yes. And those are the gifts that you get. You know how to mourn somebody. I know how to take care of somebody who's lost somebody now. And I know how to live a little bit better because my life is punctuated with his death. It's a dot. It's like a tattoo. It's like, there it is. No escaping. And that is a blessing of his life, and his death too. I mean, I didn't want him to go. And candidly, it's like, we remember James Dean and Marilyn Monroe and a handful of others who were snatched in the middle of life because it really leaves a mark. Somebody fades away, it's a little different, I suppose. But he's still giving.
Yeah, that reminds me.
You know?
I just lost a friend named Jon Loduca early August. He wrote a book called Giftology. He was 44 years old
You told me. I'm sorry.
and passed away.
I heard he was a really neat man.
Incredible. His name was John, and he was born on March 16th. And he always tried to live like Jesus, and like it was just like and then the fact that he was taken away from us at such a, like, right in the middle of his life. I mean, he was on top of the world. I mean, all of these, he's made such an impact on entrepreneurs all over the world by his gifting and his strategies on how to really surprise and delight people.
I remember.
And but then the way he always talked about his wife and his daughters, he had 4 daughters. And the hole that's got to leave, you know, for them, but then also the legacy at the same time. It's like, man, how do we live like Jay? How do we live like John?
Yeah, that's that's the great gift of being awake.
Yeah.
You know, it's all around you. I mean, it's just another day unless you stop and look around. You have just these people around you unless you really look at them. I learned this as a dad. I could look at my kids or I could see them. It all depended on my mindset. And I felt like the eye of Sauron, you know, like I would just be sweeping around the room. And if I really looked at them, they would glow. They would be like, Dad really sees me, instead of, you know, just looking at you like, what are you doing? Pick that up, you know, because I can be that guy. I'm not, you know, I'm a totally regular guy. So I would just be like, hey, get off of there. You know, I'm that guy. But I'm also like, I could see them sometimes and they would glow under that. And I realized, like, God's here. He's everywhere. It's up to you. You could have a hell on earth kind of a day, driving your car, gripping the steering wheel, talking to yourself about stupid shit that you wish you'd said or whatever. Or you could be looking around, gratitude for a dear friend. It's totally up to us. And it's a tragic thing, the world. You know, it pulls you out of all of the beauty and all the grace everywhere around us. You can fight it.
But it's so beautiful at the same exact time.
What do you mean?
Like life in this world and this earth and the beauty of like all creation and like
right here.
The fact that like, I mean, I don't know, all this stuff is like, it's, it's like my mind gets blown.
That's what I mean.
Thinking about like, I mean, we have water. I think that thing will turn on. I know this is like an abandoned building now that we're in, but
yeah, it's being sold.
Like there's a spigot over there. Like all we have to do is turn that lever and fresh water will come out of that thing.
That's exactly what I mean.
It's like wow to me.
It's like a miracle.
And like before,
yeah.
Like, you know,
your wife is making a baby.
Yeah. She reminds me too. And I'm like, hey, let's go do this. Let's do that. I'm tired. I'm like, I'm making a baby.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, it is. And when we had a home birth with Evelyn.
I know you did.
And that was.
So did we with Evelyn.
We have to get the wives together.
I was talking to your wife and I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, you guys are talking about earthing and crazy. I was like, this is so great.
She's got me definitely onto that path. Like I didn't know anything about that world.
It's a good world.
But I know you're a man of faith in when you're going through life struggles like that. Like that's a tough moment, right? With what happened with Jay. What was that relationship with God like during that time and then after? And how do you, is there any thoughts you have on that?
Super corny. I mean, I just was mad. You know, I mean, it's the classic thing. I was just like, what the hell? What are you doing? Like, why is this happening? This guy is a good guy. Like, you can't discriminate. Like, what's your problem? Why my father-in-law? Why would you do this? And this way, it was just, if we were kind of all mad, I think, and hadn't really had a very good conversation with God. And I don't know how you pray, but there's formal praying that I'll do. I'll say a prayer, but I mostly just talk to God like I'm talking to you. You know,
driving down the road,
totally
trying not to cuss that guy out.
A good friend of mine actually kind of taught me that. You know, and I took that advice.
That's how I am.
Yeah, so I talk to God like, you know, what are you doing? And what are you know, and I'm kind of grousing and complaining and stuff like that. But probably I have grown the closest to God this year than before Jay's passing. I had to. I just talked my way into him. There's just something I was reading recently and I just thought it was so beautiful. You know, the Michelangelo, the painting in the Sistine Chapel, you had Adam and you've got God. God's extending his hand like this. And Adam's kind of being a dick about it. His hand is kind of like, maybe. God's like reaching. And Adam's like, I'm pretty cool. look at my abs. You know what I mean? He's just kind of sort of reaching. And I think that's kind of the deal that I kind of connected to was he was just right there the whole time. And I just wasn't really talking with him very much. And the more I started talking with him, I felt his presence. It was beautiful. It was just like there the whole time, just waiting for you, dude.
And then
I was so pissed off that I was just like, I'm not.
But how do you think now that experience and your being closer to God will impact your life now and into the future?
It's incumbent upon me. It's my responsibility to keep Jay alive in my heart and to keep his legacy in the activities and memories and chatting with him, chatting about him with you or sharing his story with other people. And you ask about my faith. It's exactly the same thing. It's kind of like, Jesus died for our sins. It was a little over 2,000 years ago. We stop talking about that and it ends. You are the recipient of a great gift unless you don't see it that way. It's December 25th. It's Christmas unless you decide to go into the office. It's up to us. It's driving home and seeing all this beauty around you, or just thinking about picking up the milk and what kind of bullshit you dealt with all day long. It's right here. It's all right here. It's super cool, but it's infuriatingly simple. But losing Jay crashed me pretty hard. And sometimes that's one of the ways I think he reaches us.
Yeah, allowing you to go through that experience, then that way you'll be able to help others through that experience, and that'll be the gift that keeps on giving.
Brother, that's the legacy.
And that might be the why, too. Like, that's your why, and I'm sure that there's 25 other people that were at the Loduca house that day that are going to have other stories that are even more.
As long as it never comes out of my mouth like, yeah, that's why. No, I still think it was a shitty thing that happened. I think it was a tragic thing that happened. I think it was a terrible thing that happened, and I wish it hadn't. But I could decide to do something with it or not. I don't understand the reasons for things. It's not my business to know those.
They get revealed later, though. I believe that.
I don't know.
Well, in my life, I feel like I don't see it in the moment. Like when you're in your own movie and you're in the valley, you don't see it. But as time goes along, if you're more open and you're like listening to God, he like almost like gives you like a little tap on the shoulder and
ooh, that's a crazy thing to say.
And say like,
yeah, I know exactly what
you
that
have to
feels
listen
like.
to him.
You bet you do.
And then all of a sudden, like he like reveals it to you.
I had the most. I mean, this is a weird thing to say because it's just the truth, though. I talk to God all the time. I'm not going to tell you I hear him. You know what I mean? But it has happened to me, and fairly recently.
Well, they say in sales, man, you're supposed to listen more than you talk.
Right on, dude. Well, that's a really good point. And so, I'm asking, I'm praying, I'm engaging a lot. But I remember just a few months ago, I was just sitting in the living room and I literally could feel the presence of something loving and paternal, hand on my shoulder. And I was just like, what the hell, blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, I've got you. And I just got me. It still gets me. It's a really cool feeling. And I'm, always reaching. And hadn't really felt like that before. I don't know what to make of that, but yeah, I mean, it's not like I was walking around the desert and got these 2 tablets. I mean, I just was having a moment in my living room, but it was meaningful to me. No burning bushes, though.
Yeah. If you could look ahead and see the legacy that you'll leave, what do you hope that people will say about Jon Loduca and the impact that you've made on their lives? There's going to be a line around the building. What are they going to be talking about?
He saw me. That's what I really would love. Is that people would feel seen, And
that's all we got for today, folks. Thanks for being here, man. This is an epic episode.
Thanks,
this is really good.
It was nice of you to.
I don't even think we talked about process one time.
You promised me we wouldn't. I was like, great.
Yeah, I don't like talking about
Yeah.
it. You probably have done so many podcasts on Playbook Builder and AI and process and all
Tons
that
of great stuff to talk about with that.
Yeah, and like I'm sure they'll be able to find all that stuff, right? Where's the best place to like if people want to like find out about all the cool, crazy stuff that you're inventing in the world?
Yeah, playbookbuilder.com.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
So you keep all the wisdom inside.
Isn't that cool that
It is cool.
This whole story I've been telling you about, and that's the business I'm in. I mean, does it mean like, oh yeah, you see how the continuity between those two worlds?
No, it's incredible. That's why I'm glad to be here in Holland with you, and I'm excited to spend the rest of the day with you.
I'm glad to be your friend. It was a blessing to spend some time with you.
Yeah. So thanks.
Thanks, man. This is neat. Thank you.